Talk to your data clear and bright. QInsights helps you do it right. Safe and steady side by side. Your research partner always on your side.
Welcome to this March 31st, 2026 webinar from QInsights, Analyzing Open-Ended Questions. And it's important these days to say the date and the year because things move so fast in the world of AI that in 6 months the presentation might look very different already. My name is Susanne Friese and I'm co-founder of QInsights. And I'm happy that you're here today and interested in learning more about QInsights, and especially with the focus in this webinar of analyzing open-ended questions. I'm in qualitative research already for over 30 years, and I've been teaching people how to analyze data, and mostly of the coding kind. I know in this webinar also people who use different approaches, so I'm also familiar with those, but mostly I've been dealing with teaching people how to code data with those what I think is legacy programs. But what I've always been doing, I've been at this edge between, or that, yeah, let's call it an edge. The methodology on the one side, what we want to achieve with our analysis, and technology on the other. And always looking at how can we actually achieve what we want to achieve with the technology that is available. Let it be some of those cactus programs where it was all about coding, or also a digital tool was Word or Excel. People also used those kind of tools, and now we have AI. And QInsights is a result of thinking about what's possible with with the technology that we have now, and on the other side, what we want to achieve, and then how we can achieve that. And QInsights is the physical thing that emerged from looking at both sides. Just to tell you a little bit about where we're coming from. So we are a startup located in the Netherlands, and our mission is nothing less than to transform qualitative data analysis. Just based on what I just told you, because now we have a new technology, so we can rethink analysis and how we can do that. And I hope, to give you a little glimpse of that and how that is actually possible if we leave the coding world behind us, what I mean, the tagging data world, and engage with data in conversation, and also with our semi-structured data. We do have a strong commitment to ethical and responsible AI use, and that means we're not letting AI do its own thing. It's not pressing a button and then some results come out and voila, it looks very nice and wonderful. And point is, it does look very nice and wonderful. It's that shiny object that looks so perfect, and it looks like we can kind of plug it into a report and that's it. But that's where the danger is. And if you have been following me, what I've been doing, I've been organizing this conference on AI agents for qualitative analysis, and the aim was there to stretch the system, basically to tell people to just let AI take the rein. And normally, as qualitative researchers, we're kind of hesitant to do that, but let's see what happens. Let's see what happens when we do. And we have collected a rich body of data, and you will gonna learn more about that when we start disseminating and also publishing about this experiment. What I can tell you, I just want to share one quote with you, and that was a person said that at the end of the day, and she just kind of addressed the LLMs and saying, I wish we could take it down a notch. It always looks so perfect, and we really have to make a constant effort to just kind of look into it and not just let AI do its thing. Yeah, and having said that, let's take a look at QInsights and what QInsights actually does. So we do support various formats from doc, Excel, PDF text and audio files. You could also use video, but everything right now it's going to be text. So we do transcribe video or audio files, and the analysis is on text data. We are planning to implement also the support of video data, and that would mean also audio snippet, and then one or the other doesn't matter, but that you then can link your transcript back to the audio and video and make it more multimodal, which is going to happen, and it's on the roadmap, and it's probably going to happen this year. But for now, it's only text, and you could see on the left-hand side the types of data that you can analyze. So beyond the open ends, it can be any form of transcript, shareholder feedback, open end social media comments, observational notes. It could be newspaper articles, reports, anything that you can have as text documents. I do say that later, again, in a different context, this is not about big data analysis. It's about qualitative data analysis. So it's not about your thousands and thousands of pages. And that's why I'm not saying here the customer reviews that could be 5,000 a day. You need ML for this. You don't need generative AI. Generative AI would get you far here. So it's all AI, but what we focus in here is on generative AI. And I will also tell you, what's the beauty of it is and why it's different from using ML technology, which we already had the last 20 years. So this is about the new possibilities that we actually have with generative AI. This is a process, very roughly, when you work with QInsights. So you first create your project and upload your data, and it takes a bit of data preparation. And it's best if you maybe read the documentation or watch some tutorials beforehand, because it feels maybe like a lot of work if you upload something and it doesn't work, and you have to figure out why it doesn't work, and it doesn't recognize metadata and those kind of things, and instead of just doing it right from the first instance. So with Excel files, it means it just needs to be one sheet, and will get a message when you upload an Excel file that has multiple sheets. But yeah, it needs to be clean. It needs to be one clear column header, and then your data in the rows. It does really apply garbage in, garbage out. You get higher quality out if you just pay a little attention to how the data needs to be prepared. So that's the first part. It's not going to take you too long if you know how to prepare the data. Then once the data is uploaded in the format that we require, so we can link and systematically metadata to it, like sociodemographics, and we will see that also with the Excel, with the open ends. So that it does require some structure, so it can make systematic use of it. So we don't want AI just do educated guesses. So we do want to have a mix of the working with the LLMs, the way they work and the nature they work, but also give it structured data so it can also work in a systematic way through your data. Then you can start your analysis and start discovering things. And these are the 5 analysis options we currently offering. So I show you theme analysis, and I show you conversational analysis. And for this webinar, I chose the guided analysis, and then we move on to sentiment analysis. Grid analysis is something you can do with interview data. So you need respondents there that are clearly structured and can be recognized. So that you look up some of the older webinars previous webinars where we actually looked at interview data. So let's move to QInsights now and start a new project. So you can see the first steps here. I just call it webinar for now. So you normally would enter a project description, and I've already prepared a project, so we look at the project description later. That will be context information for your LLM. So always think about that. So what, if that would be like a human assistant you would have, and if you want to work with that person together, what does a person need to know in order to work with you on the project? And this is also what you need to enter here. So the LLM has that information. So let's open the project now and enter our Excel file, we see open ends. So this is how our example data for today look like. So we have the first column here with the case ID. And we will see that later that you can use that to label quotes so you see where they're coming from. Here is this data. Well, there's a name. It's synthetic data, but you might have some other identifier that might not be names of people, but just an example here. So we have some sociodemographics here, so gender, number of children, marital status, education, and you will see how that is managed. And then we have 3 open-ended questions that we want to analyze. So now let's add this file to QInsights. It needs to be closed. The detect speaker option we don't need here. That is for interview files in order to systematically recognize respondents and interviewer speaker IDs. So here's our document. And immediately it recognizes the columns. And that's why we said you need to have a clean file in order for this to be possible. And the case ID in the name is just there for you to later link that to quotes, but these are here our variables. So we have gender, which is a text variable. We have number of children, it's a number. And you also, so we have a third option is Boolean. It adds yes, no, like chocolate, doesn't like chocolate, something like that, a yes, no answer. Then we have 3 open-ended questions. They are the data we want to analyze, so we don't classify them as variables. So we click save here. Now we let the system import the data, and we will see also shortly why, what's all happening here right now. Let me move back to the PowerPoint presentation and to some explanation I want to give to you. And that is more related to working with general chatbots on the general understanding of LLMs. And then I also show you what we do with QInsights and how that differs. But this is some general understanding that is nice to actually have. So what we see here on top is that there is a thing like a temperature. And even if we stay with the same model, and if you set the temperature to 0, you see we always get the same answer. If you set the temperature to something like 1, it always depends. Sometimes it's between 0 and 1, sometimes between 0 and 2. You get much more variety in the answer. That means the LLM is allowed to not take the most likely word as answer, but to look for words that are probabilistic, not the most likely one. And that's where we get a broader variety of answers, and answers are always different the higher the temperature setting. With QInsights, we have a fairly low temperature. For some features it's 0, for some features it's 0.2, because we want some variability. We want not always the same results. And we also see with theme analysis that we also, with the temperature of 0, we have set it to 0 there. You're not always getting the same outcome. This works in a chatbot where you have no data in between. But with QInsights, you have uploaded your data, so you have your knowledge base there. I'll explain that in a minute. And even with the same temperature, LLM does kind of different things if you rerun it. But you will see, and I point that out, how you can see what kind of results are stable and what results are more right and left. And that's why it needs you to decide what's important. What do you want to follow up on? And not just an LM say, well, these are your themes and you're done. Yeah. So it needs you in the middle. And the bottom part, while you see here that different LLMs do different things. Yeah. Well, you might know Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, Kimi, DeepSeek. Yeah, there's a lot of different LLMs now out there. I also use mostly 3 different ones where I'm switching back and forth depending on what I'm doing. So each of these are like different people. They give you different answers because of a number of reasons, different system prompts, different types of training, and those kind of things. Don't want to go into much detail here. At QInsights, we use OpenAI when the data is actually sent to an LLM. OpenAI is, from also comparing it to other chatbots that I'm also using, always has the most analytical answers. Claude is kind of chatty one, of course, is very good for coding tasks, but for computer coding tasks. And Gemini is one I use a lot if it means like, it needs more internet search. I mean, all of them can go into the internet right now, but it's still different with Gemini because it's Google. It has more that background of search. So with QInsights, where we give you the model that we decide on because it's the most analytical one. But given what I will show you, what I explain later in terms of RAG, retrieval augmented analysis, whether we would work now with Gemini model or with an OpenAI model, the differences won't be that large because the chatbots will be working on your data as a knowledge base. So then the training data and the system prompts don't matter so much within a system like QInsights because of the knowledge base they're working with. Just to tell you as much here, because it's not a whole lesson on AI literacy here. But to give you a little bit of background, we do offer, if you don't want to work with an OpenAI model, but we are within a European context, and I showed that at the end of the presentation, we do offer that you can use Mistral, but Mistral is about here, and OpenAI is here in terms of its capability. Talking about taking it a few notch downs, well, you get that with Mistral. It's not on par with the top model, so you do get lesser quality, but you might prefer that because it's a European model, and they might also hopefully become better in the future. So we need to understand that LLMs are probabilistic. They're not deterministic. It's not every time we click a button, we get the same answer. So that's what we need to work with. And that's where the ethical responsible AI use come in. That if you're not part of it, you cannot control it, or you cannot see, next time you press it, the results will be different. If you go with the first result and that's the outcome, is that responsible AI use. So that's why their interaction is so important. So this is a general behavior of general chatbots. Now we're moving into QInsights that actually is built on a RAG system. So what's now actually happening when the document is uploading, what we're waiting for in the background is probably long done by now, but all of things are happening when the documents upload. There's some embedding is taking place, vectorization and stuff like that. So it's building now your knowledge base. And that's very different from uploading something to ChatGPT. It can process your data wonderfully, but this whole process doesn't take place because now when you ask a question, it's not just immediately answering. It's first looking at your knowledge base and seeing what's in your knowledge base and retrieving information that relates to your question. And that has a number of advantages for a number of things. Also, if you have lots of data, so it reduces the data that can be worked with. That has to do something with context window limits. But it also speaks to that also for the GDPR, we should only work with, the least amount of data that is actually necessary for a certain task. So not just kind of, dump all data into an analysis again. And then based on your question and based on what's relevant from your data, which is the knowledge base, that is then given to the LLM for processing. That's where data is moving out of QInsights to an LLM for processing, and in our case, a GPT model. And so With a system like QInsights, you have the retrieved context plus your question, and then the model works with that. So not even what's only happening here, it's what's happening with a general purpose chatbot. So that's why the quality of answers are different with a system like QInsights and your general purpose chatbot that might also just, forget 80% of your data because it considers some of the data. It has gotten better with larger context window, but here you can be sure it first queried your data. And now coming back to the different models, the answer, if you do use comparative models, I did some tests using some Gemini models, and we use OpenAI models, because the answer is based on the data that is retrieved, and that is a technical process that is independent of the LLM. The answers are not as that different as what I've seen here on this slide. Yeah, if you just work in different apps completely. So because of that technical process of creating that knowledge base, even with different models, the answer won't be so different if it's the same quality of model. Yeah, of the model. We do offer the possibility to work with Mistral if you don't want to work with OpenAI, even though it's always in the European context. But you have to be aware that the quality of Mistral, it is actually, it is a couple of notches down. It's not as good as what the latest OpenAI model can provide to you. So we automatically produce a summary, but this is just basically recognizing in this case what this data set is all about. It's not summarizing your 105 cases here, so it's more relevant for other type of data. But I always say the summary is just for you to remind you, okay, what's in the document. It's not an analysis yet. Yeah, and then I wanted to show you about the data context. So of course we have only responded here, so we don't have to actually define anything. But if you have interview data, you will also, that data context then opens directly, and you can then say who's the respondent and who's the interviewer. Just that you kind of know how it looks like. So interviewer is context, framing the question is never analyzed. And of course we do want to have this here. Yeah, because sometimes interviewers also say a lot, and then if that's analyzed, you get quotes from the interviewer, and that's what you don't want. So that is the respondent context, and then you can define the profile, and here it's already in the Excel file, and that will be read directly from the Excel file, and in this case it's all speaker variables, but you could also have document ones if you have multiple documents. And then now we have the values here that are from the Excel file. And Dave, I know you're waiting for it, but first we need to get this stable. So you, at some point, you hopefully soon you will see a button here. It's actually already on the kind of current kind of to do of planning sheet, that you also for interview data have an option where you import an Excel file that has all of those variables in there, that you don't have to enter those manually. So that's the data context. The data context can be used to set filters, but it's also metadata the LLM has. So within a conversation, you can just ask it for differences with regard to educational level, gender, marital status, and so on. So this is information that is now structurally given to the LLM and not just guessed by the LLM. Yeah, if you have also in other data you have male and female names, it kind of makes an educated guess, who is male and who is female, but it's not structurally, it's not systematic. So here it is built in systematically. And now actually I move to the project where I've already done some analysis. So just to show you what I've already done. So all the analysis that you do live here in the archive. You can you can either have, a list view where, it just goes over pages if you have multiple analysis, or you can start sorting your analysis. And I haven't do any cross-case analysis here or cross-question analysis. So these are analysis I've done regarding question 1, question 2, and so on. So you can organize it according to that. What I'm going to do now is I'm running an analysis live again, but I show you some results, some outcome, and talk about that in the PowerPoint presentation. So because when you work with open ends, and by the way, so this is the project description I entered. This is now always taken into account. So you can analyze kind of everything together, or just pick one of the questions, which most of the time makes sense if you work with open ends. I do a theme analysis now, so I don't necessarily need the cases. And I show you that you see how it works. And normally now, for everybody who has tried that in the past, it could take some time, but now some agents are actually at work, so we don't have to hard code every kind of step of the way. So it's now little AI agents who have your fantasy working, but it's one task and giving somebody else another task. And so also QInsights is using the technology, and we recently updated to this agentic backend, so to speak. So now while I'm explaining it, this analysis was already done. So you get your themes here, and I also have to say something about those themes. You can export the results and get the references, and I've already done that and prepared that for you. So let me go to the reasons for having children, make this a bit bigger. So these are, So when you export, you get your theme here and description, and then it exports all the respondents that have said something about transformation of self-identity. And we treat each answer as one analysis unit. So then in that answer, if the answers tend to be a bit longer, there might also be other information. So it's always the entire answer that you get out. So we have transformation of self, we have relational deepening and configuration, we have ordinary life, daily texture. And this is what I was referring to before, that with the new LLM, that analysis has become a bit more sophisticated than it was before. It wasn't wrong before either, because these are data that I used also in my coding time. But what I have to say now, this is actually new, and that's why it might be a bit different. I just extended it to 105 cases. Before I was always using this small data set with 24 cases. But I want to give you more data. And by the way, we have some users who have rather large is relative, but they have around 1,000 cases, so that also works. We're not working with customer feedback data where companies get like 5,000 feedbacks every day. So for this, generative AI is not the good fit. You can use AI, but then it's machine learning. So that's a different way of analyzing. So we're focusing more on the smaller data sets, but it's okay up to 1,000. They even had 1,200 in their data set. So that works. So this data set has 105 cases. Now we have ambivalence in timing, and so it's about the age part. 35. We have to think about having children or not. So the biological clock kind of argument here. And then you can also see whether a theme is more prevalent than another you see if there's more data behind it or not. So that is what you can, if you click on the details and export it. And now let me go to the PowerPoint presentation as well. And that was also the reason why I said something about the non-deterministic nature of LLMs. So this is the so this is the first theme analysis I ran for reasons for having children. And yeah, I prepared it so you don't have to memorize all of it. And that is the second one. We do have now set the temperature to 0, so to make it more deterministic. But that temperature of 0 means it's basically also in the wording. It's using the always the most likely outcome, but in the analysis, it's still not doing 100% the same thing. Yeah, unless you would use machine learning procedures. But then I think it's, you get something different with machine learning. It's, you don't get the richness that you get if a generative AI kind of looks for patterns, because you get the semantic connections and not just what's in the words. And to give you an example here, or that I often actually use, is the word of trust. Yeah, if it's machine learning, it might look for synonyms and trustworthy, those kind of things, and variation of the word. But with generative AI, it understands the semantic connections also. Look at the context here. It's about children and happiness. So it's not looking into its area where it's about business relationship and trust. It's about parents and children and how that relates to trust. And if something is, she's telling her mother, all the time, everything that the children have done or not, but he's not telling me, then that is an issue of trust. Yeah, and that is generative AI can capture those things. It's not about words, and that's why it's actually so interesting. So if you compare the two analyses, we get 5 themes that are more or less the same. And then you could also interpret that in the way they're quite stable, those themes, because they come up, and they probably also would come up in a certain analysis again. And so you can interpret it like that. So the wording, you see the identity transformation, personal growth, and here's the transformation of self and identity. So that's kind of the same. But we do get one theme that is a nuanced version of that one, the practical constraints and the weight of timing. And we have here ambivalence, timing, and honest constraints. If you would read the descriptions, it's a variation of it's not exactly the same. And then we get, from the first and the second analysis, we get children and moral and existential anchor and the conscious choice. It's not in the second analysis, as well as ordinary life, daily textures, or repair redemption. It's not part of the first analysis. So those things are then something to look at. Do I want to, are they maybe not so prevalent, those themes? You can also see that at the number of quotes that are pulled. Or is that particular something I want to focus on? So it's always a good rule of practice. Just don't do one theme analysis and then that's it. But to pull 2 or 3 theme analysis and see where your most stable themes and how you continue. So now it depends on what's the focus of, or what you want to get out. Yeah, so if somebody only wants to pull out some themes and look at what are the stable themes and pull out the quotes Excel table, that's done. Yeah, then you of course save a lot of time as compared to having done all the manual coding as in the previous life, so to speak. But you can dig much deeper, and so if you do this and some sentiment analysis that I show you a bit later, after two hours you can pull out something that probably took much longer, or that certainly took much longer before. Because what I want to show you now, I looked at one theme, this one, and so you can always go and open up the analysis that you've done. You can always ask follow-up questions as well. So if you wanted to, we could go into depth with themes now here. But this conversation will be about all the themes as pulled. If you want to focus on just one particular one, and I think it actually was one on the here. The relational deepening and reconfiguration. That is the theme I went into more depth and explored it in more depth. And I did that not by me asking questions, but by having the LLM help me to do that in the guided analysis. So that is that chat. Well, if you start the guided analysis, it will actually ask you, nice that you're here, which language you want to talk with me, and tell me about your project and which theme you actually want to explore, or which topic you want to explore into more depth. So it's starting in this conversational style, and it will actually prompt you to tell it, the model, what you actually what you want to work on. And then what it actually does, it's suggesting some questions, and I can show you that here. Actually, I wanted to, it's in the PDF output. And this I pulled in order to show you actually something else. So I tell it now it would be nice to have the one-page view. Let's put that one-page view. So what it then actually does, it suggests some questions I can ask. So I tell it I want to work with relational deepening and reconfiguration. And then instead of me asking some more questions to go into depth, it suggests some questions that I could ask. So I can take these questions, which I did now for this example, but you can also vary. And I did vary a little bit. So you can always kind of digress from that. And then, it will give you an answer, and then it will suggest you want to ask some follow-up questions, or, want to ask the next question. And actually then I ask here, take this away. I would like to know whether the four aspects you are describing differ by gender. So just to give you an example that I can now, in the chat itself, I can now call on the metadata and all for educational difference and so on. So it will understand that and give me an idea about that. And I think this is how, better how to see this. And at some point, I did ask it specifically because it didn't do that without me asking. So I asked it specifically to now provide quotes from both fathers and mothers that support the aforementioned points. So now I probed it directly for quotes. Sometimes it gives you quotes even without asking, but I just want to show you, if you ask, and also in your question, you can also ask directly, provide supporting quotes. And remember what I showed you before in the presentation about the RAG system, retrieval augmented analysis. So that's where the answers are grounded in the data. So the quotes you get here are from the data, and it pulled now the names because I have the name column, but you could also ask, give me quotes including the ID, the ID from the respondent. So that's where it is actually was coming from. What I want to actually point out here, and that I go back to the presentation. So this is 2 pages out of 15 pages total in the dialogue. The dialogue is there for you to retrieve everything that is interesting about a particular question. You then have to schedule some time to work with the dialogue. So that is something also to keep the dialogue to one topic. The AI will, if you let it, will kind of like, oh, do you want to explore this? Or do you want to explore this? And you just have to stay a bit focused. Previously, with the times of coding, I called it the coding swamp. Some called it the coding trap, that you had 2,000 codes and then didn't know what to do with that, or it took a long time to clean up. So with the chats as well, be disciplined, just have one chat about one topic. And even if the AI is like, oh, should I now compare it with this? And should I do it compared with it? You guide the analysis and you can take this as nice ideas or take a note and maybe make a new chat from it. And because your task is then to work with this chat. For right now, this is the output you can create. We do want to also offer you some more ways to prepare reporting within QInsights. For now, you have the archive, you have your data, you can export them. And I'm just telling you, you prepare your chat and build up your analysis archive. For right now, you need to then, for the moment, you need to take it out and then to read it and to prepare your analysis. So now I hope that this is something that is the next the phase of our development, that this will be implemented soon as well. So for now, this is how far we take you to do the analysis, to go back here so that you have everything in your archive. And you can organize your archive by certain research questions or topics, or how you want to analyze. You can work with a team. You can share your project. So you could also analyze the chat by who has done which analysis. So you could do that as well. So this is how far QInsights takes you with the analysis. But I want to show you also another one, the sentiment analysis. I did a sentiment analysis and I did a chat, and for some reason So if you do a sentiment analysis, you do get something like a pie chart. And let me do this again. No, you don't get something like a pie chart, you get a pie chart. So reasons for not having children, you go to sentiment analysis, and now you enter your dimension. It doesn't have to be positive or negative, can be emotional or rational, disappointed, whether it's excitement or disappointed, neutral, excitement. Always do put an or in the middle. If you do and, it's Boolean here. If you do and, it puts all together. So it can be multiple dimensions, and not only two, we do two here, and it can be more than just positive and negative, because if it's Gen AI, it's not machine learning anymore. And then we treat currently each of the answer as one unit. You can argue, well, it is a bit problematic, but it takes the most prevalent positive or negative, because it could be both in one answer. I'm aware of that. But it's it gives you like an overall picture that for reasons for not having children, it's more rational versus emotional, and the sentiment analysis for the other question it's a bit more emotional than rational reasons. It immediately gives you a summary here, which you can take or leave or adapt. And then it does give you an overview you can check, and you can also export that to Excel if you want, how it has evaluated each of the responses. The interesting part here, I find also the follow-up here. If you say, cluster all rational responses, and I make it explicit now and provide some examples or some, and social demographic. We can also do that. So now it does what an LM does well. It clusters the responses, and we get like nice cluster names and some examples below. I did only ask it for a few examples and not for an exhaustive list here. And that is very similar to what people have been done previously with coding. And I can now make the dialogue large, but I can also always go back to the other view here. So now I get case numbers here, so I can see where the data is coming from. So I get my clusters here, and if I would have said categories, I would have named it differently. And so I get an overview here. And now just as a last thing I do here, and then I open up for a question, is regarding these 6 clusters, their difference with regard to educational level. So now it looks in the data context information that has been provided, looks up the answer. We let it work for a second. So QInsights uses Azure servers. That's where we live in a data center there in Europe. And that's, yeah, I explain it also as like the space we rent there. So we don't have a server in the basement. That would not be very safe. And especially we don't have basements here in the Netherlands. Anyway, we only have garages. But so QInsights lives in a secure space that we purchase, basically enterprise grade security. There it actually is double encrypted, so it's 2 fences around it. So that's where your data lives. You secure basically your projects with the password you set. You can do multi-factor authentication if you want. Your data is yours alone, and you can only, we see the meta information, like what, how many analyses are run, whether people do sentiment or this type of analysis, but not your data. And no training is done on the data as well. And I explained it before. Yeah, a lot of things happen on the platform, and only in the last instances after the retrieval has been done based on your question, the data is sent to the LLM and is also not stored there. It comes back with your answer, so nothing is stored then outside. Because of the space we rent there, basically we can fulfill all those data security criteria, and as we are in Europe, or make the service that we require, or we purchase, say the service or the data need to be processed in Europe because we want to be GDPR compatible. So the servers are actually either in Paris or Sweden, and you can also look this up on our website with the data privacy pages. We offer a free trial, and you get 1 million tokens to play with. So here the answer, it has been working a little bit now because I ask for these educational levels, and you get some overview here as well, and you also get supporting quotes. And I'm just doing that quickly. So what I wanted to show you here, as you might be interested in that, we have now integrated billing here as well. And so you can see the license options here. You can also then see here, of course, I have a lot of tokens here. Depending on your license, you will get a certain number of tokens. And for the educational license, it's also written here. If you run out of tokens, you can always buy additional token packages. This is kind of what comes with the license, and the token packages we give is kind of what we know, what we experienced so far, what most people use. I mean, there are people who use 60 million in a year. That also happens. Just that, that's the tokens that come. To get to see the educational price, you need to sign up with an educational license. So you see the differences here. Also with the business license, if you sign up with a company email, you also see non-profit prices. So in case you're a non-profit company, so the prices will be somewhere in the middle between those two. So you can buy your own individual license if you're convinced about the app after testing it. So that's the first step we recommend. Go and try the register for a free trial. You find it on our website. I just post the post the link in the chat. And then you also get a number of onboarding emails where we send you links to video tutorials that we have, and the manual and some tips and stuff like that to get you onboarded. But you're also always welcome to shoot me an email and ask a question. Now we have a few minutes left for questions.
Talk to your data clear and bright. QInsights helps you do it right. Safe and steady, side by side. Your research partner always on your side.